I'm Will Hedrick.
And I'm Jordan Schaffer.
And this is Dog Ears and Timestamps, a book club podcast.
We're making reading fun.
Making it fun. Funsies. This is the last episode of our Neverwhere series.
Yeah, it's a fun journey through the book. It was cool kind of getting to know, I feel like we got to know Neil Gaiman a little bit. Got to learn about each other, how we're reading the books, a lot about how the different intake methods for reading, change things, because I swapped between reading and listening, as, we can talk about here in a minute, but very cool first book experience, honestly. I really enjoyed it all.
Yeah, this has been really cool. I'm glad that we decided to try and do something like this for a lot of reasons, but the main reason just being as much as there was to sort of learn, like everything you just said, being able to approach reading a book in a different way.
Yeah.
Thinking about, with the goal of talking about it with somebody and all that sort of stuff. Usually, aside from, shitty school reports that I didn't care about, I didn't try on those at all. That was literally just like, here, take this piece of paper that I scribbled things on so that you can shut up about it. Every other book that I read for fun, I just read for myself, and I never really talked about anything to anybody. Even the big books like Harry Potter that we all read, we'd be like, yeah, that was cool, and then go on about our day. Like, we didn't actually talk about it.
Yeah, I know sometimes when I think you and I would talk about Game of Thrones, because you had been reading it as after the show came out, right?
Yeah, I was super late to the game on that.
And anyway, it was really fun listening to you talk about it, just because of where you were and how I had listened to those books so many times. Honestly, I was like in the middle of a dropout of college, so I was like super depressed, bummed on my life, and I just honestly, this is gonna sound a little depressing, but I got lost in the Game of Thrones world, and that's sort of where I threw my depression kind of into Westeros, and I got obsessed. I read all the lore on the wikis about all the characters, and anyway, just then kind of being so obsessed and then hearing you get into it, that was a lot of fun, just hearing your different thoughts, and you got a very good memory with books and stuff, so that's always been something I've kind of admired about you, especially like in history classes and things. Like, that was always, you were great at like all the other classes that we were ever in together, like it seemed, but just history and English, you stood out.
I have a tendency for remembering names and facts because I find it interesting.
Were you good at...
That's all there is to it.
Were you good at German when you took it? You seemed to like it a lot.
No, it was easy for me to pick up on rules and, the tendencies of the language.
Yeah.
But the literal memorization of the words was not something I was good at. That sort of traditional learning structure of language, or learning another language, rather, where it's just a bunch of memorization in a formal class like that. I wasn't good at that sort of stuff, but I could remember the rules and things like that, just... I guess in the same way that I could remember different things in history class. And then the rules and logic of different fantasy worlds, speaking to books like you were talking about, I was really good at remembering Game of Thrones. Because for whatever reason, I just pay attention to that stuff. That's
cool. There's so many names and things in that one. It's you gotta really pay attention. And
yeah.
Actually, so it's funny. I was since I've been moving into this new house, I found my old Mr. Kippy shirt, like my Read Mr. Kippy shirt.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if we've talked about him yet on the podcast, but
I got one.
He's back in mine and Will's hometown of Portland, Texas. Mr. Kippy was a gentleman who went around to all the different libraries in the Coastal Bend, South Texas area, and he would go to libraries or go to different elementary schools with his book van, and he would just go and he'd promote reading. He'd read them a chapter or something from a really interesting book, a kid's book.
Like a little reading event for kids to be all cool. Like, yeah.
Exactly, and he's such a goofy, fun, nice guy that he's the best. He's one of
And then we grew up and met his daughters.
Oh,
and
yeah.
became friends with them.
And then hanging out with him. I never knew him actually as Mr. Kippy. I knew him as Mr. Edge, which is kind of weird for everybody else. Everybody else was calling him Kippy or Mr. Kippy.
Yeah, that's how I know him, was Mr. Kippy. I was just like, Mr. Kippy's awesome. It'll be great to go to the library and have another reading with Mr. Kippy or whatever. And then whenever we met Caitlin, she was like, yeah, y'all might know my dad is Mr. Kippy. I was
no
shit.
You might have heard
Mr. Kippy's your dad.
The local celebrity.
Right.
But well, anyway, man, how was your week since last Tuesday? We talked a little bit, because of what was going on, but how was it for you?
Oh, it's just all the same. It's just work. And like I mentioned a little bit last week, is just work in postseason baseball is all it is.
Gotcha. Well, I was out of town, and I had you do the favor of checking in on the puppies. Is anything interesting happen with them?
No.
Okay, well, that's good. I'd rather nothing interesting happen.
Nothing super interesting happened.
Well, Panda escaped, and
Right. Totoro tried to escape for a half second.
Yeah, I saw that somebody put
I put that little cinder block underneath that part of the fence. I caught him digging there.
Thank you.
And I was like,
save me.
No.
I don't think so, Toto. But cool. Well, then so when did you find time to read?
So for whatever reason, after last week's recording, and then I did like the first edit and put it up so that you could listen to it in the morning before doing the final edit. I was just in a weird mood and I couldn't sleep, so I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna finish the book." So I just laid in bed and finished the book, and then went to sleep. You know, I don't remember how long it took. It was probably a few. I felt like I went to sleep way later than I wanted to. So I just finished it then, and then I didn't read it again until today when I was doing my notes.
Okay, awesome. And did you see anything from like the skip in the week from like reading it on last Tuesday to reading it today?
Nothing changed in my experience reading it the second time for notes.
Yeah, I think usually the only things that ever change are kind of when we go over notes and the subtle differences we catch between each other.
Yeah,
that's when I
really
really get.
Time. Yeah, that's when I might pick up on something.
Yeah, for me, reading this week, I was going out of town on Wednesday after I took a half day at work, so I left at 11, and then I ended up driving up to Detroit. And so I was up there, went to a Red Wings game. So that was a lot of fun. We ended up losing, but it was the first professional hockey game I ever went to, and it was a lot of fun. They were starting a bunch of new guys. And anyway, and then I just hung out with my girlfriend's family up there, and that was a lot of fun. But we actually got into a car accident, so I flew back on Sunday rather than driving back. And then Sunday is actually when I started crushing the book. I was listening to it a little bit, but I had the book in my hands already just in case I couldn't read or my headphones died or whatever.
Right.
So I did this thing that I used to do a long time ago. I used to listen to audiobooks and have the hard book, and I'd have the guy read to me basically as I was reading the book. And doing that, it was really weird. I caught almost every detail. I was like so focused because I was listening and I was reading.
Right.
And I didn't give it more than the once over this time because I ended up reading more than half of it, and it was cool. When I listened to it again, I do always do a final re-listen today, the day of the recording while I'm at work. And when I listened to it today, I was like, man, I missed so much when I'm like working, just because re-listening, I was like, man, when did that thing happen that I was really like, I wanted to hear that, like hear him say it. And some of the pronunciations we can go over later, but I was just like, man, is that how you say it, or is that how Neil Gaiman says it, or is that how like British people say it, or I mean, is there a difference between the British pronunciation and the American pronunciation? Like we go to Trafalgar Station later or whatever, and in One Piece there's a character, his name is Trafalgar Law, and so that's how I read it in the book, and when he says it in the audiobook it's Trafalgar or something. So I'd never heard it before. So anyway, it was just it was fun. And then I got back Sunday and just crushed the book again today. I didn't do any listening Monday, but good week overall, except for the accident.
Yeah.
Other than that, I was able to get work done. And
people wreck their cars. It happens.
Of course.
I wrecked my car a year ago.
And I mean, we're all safe, so it could be a lot worse. And,
right.
Yeah, all's well that ends well. But
all that ends well.
But it was fun, and it was cool reading because Bailey's done with the book, so. Oh, yeah. She's been waiting on me to catch up, and she's like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. You keep leaving off on a cliffhanger. I was like, yeah, we're stopping at the end of chapters. That's typically when authors leave cliffhangers to make you want to, because usually you'll be reading and then you'll be like, okay, I'll stop after this chapter. And then when they leave it on a cliffhanger, it's like,
just sit down and read an entire book. Exactly. I've only done that like maybe twice.
I don't know if I've ever done that. I remember sitting down and reading maybe like half of a Harry Potter book or like half of Aragon or Eldest or something, but it took me like all day. I'm a slow reader. So
I think I'm probably like a medium-ish reader. I really don't know. But one time I sat down and read all of Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury.
What other books did he do?
Fahrenheit 450.
Oh, that's why I know it. And then not Animal Farm. Yeah, Animal Farm. No, that's George Orwell.
Yeah.
Got it.
Ray Bradbury was all anti-technology and like anti-future.
See, that's why I thought he did 1984 too, but that's George Orwell also. So
yeah, George Orwell was all about socialism, being against socialism and stuff, and like bad capitalism. And Ray Bradbury was all against technology and futurism. Yeah,
he would not be into all the AI we have, I guess, huh?
Oh, no. He like actively was like, don't do that shit. What is wrong with you people? That's what all his books are about, is against like that sort of thing. But I read Dandelion Wine in one sitting one time. And then one time I read a separate piece by John Knowles all in one sitting.
A separate piece. See, now on books that you've read that I haven't read and vice versa, it might be fun later for the podcast to just do like a special episode. Like one week
Yeah, we can just do an offshoot where we just read the book and then do one episode.
One episode, yeah, where we talk about the full script, because you would have already read
something
it.
Something like a bigger book that a lot of people may have read. Like if we wanted to go over a Harry Potter book, something like that.
Or like, any kind of big book. Maybe even...
we could even do the entire series that way.
Yeah,
honestly, because then that would just be like 7 bonus episodes of us going over the entire series.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Well, let us know what y'all think about that. But anyway, let's get into what Neil Gaiman was all about.
And while we're going through this, I'll keep you guys updated on the Game 3 between the Boston Red Sox and New York Yankees, which will be totally useless to you because by the time you hear this, the game will have already ended. Well, but you'll get to hear my commentary on it.
Yeah, and that's priceless. So,
speaking of baseball, before we get in.
Oh, yeah, no.
So at this point, we're finishing up the divisional round.
Who's we?
The divisional series. We as in baseball in general.
Oh, baseball, okay.
The Astros swept the Indians, so we're going into the championship series. The Sox and Yankees are tied at 1 right now, so they've each still got 2 wins to beat the other. The Milwaukee Brewers swept the Rockies, and the Dodgers beat the Braves in 4. So it's going to be Dodgers and Brewers on the National League side, and whoever wins out between the Sox and the Yankees will play the Astros in the American League side. And then after that, we get the World Series. So it's very exciting times.
Yeah, so you're going for Astros, right?
Astros. Yeah, we're primarily a Houston sports team, and then secondarily a New England, Boston sports team.
Gotcha.
So I'm also a Red Sox fan, but when it comes down to it, because it'll probably be the Red Sox and the Astros in the American League Championship Series. When it comes down to it, it's Astros.
The Astros have been killing it too recently. They just cannot stop.
We went into the postseason in good shape, and then sweeping the Indians was clutch. We're hot as shit right now, and we'll see what happens between the Yankees and the Red Sox. They're not 1-1. They're 2-1. The Sox had won yesterday, so the Red Sox could potentially end it all today by winning, or the Yankees could take it to Game 5. We'll see what happens.
All right,
I'll let y'all know.
Yeah, keep me posted.
I'll let y'all know from the past.
Well, this will be my only avenue to sports, other than maybe checking out a Red Wings game now that I have a team to root for.
Right?
I've always rooted for Houston. I like the Texans and I like the Astros, so I got a team, but I just don't.
Having lived there for a short period and then your brother lives there and stuff like that, it's easy to identify in that way for sure. It's
the only thing I can slightly even kind of devote my loyalty to, other than maybe like A&M when I went there, but I don't know if they're ever playing that great.
That's often the problem with people when they can't get into sports, is because they don't have an easy way to identify with the team.
Yeah,
and so then you end up just trying to kind of like pick something for any arbitrary reason.
Yeah.
And, that either can or can't work for some people. But anyways.
Yeah, let's do this book. I am down. Chapter 15. You want to start us off?
Chapter 15. So we open with the party and Lamia leaving the market and heading to a house in which Down Street exists. They get to it and there's a sign that says Down Street, knock or something like that. Please knock.
Yeah, Richard. Do you want to read
it? There wasn't something else. If you want to read that entry, go ahead.
It says there's a sign that says Down Street, please knock. And then Richard goes, "You get to the street through a house?" asked Richard. "No," said Lamia. "The street is in the house." So it's just more magic.
Yeah. So they go into the house. Well, like a doorman comes and gets it. He's all, cranky because he had to wake up. They go in. They go down 4 sets of stairs that are in increasingly less impressive iteration.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And then they, at the bottom of that, they arrive at an old service elevator. They take that. And at the bottom of that, they find that they're kind of just, the elevator is just hanging out over nothing. It's kind of adjacent to a giant stone tower. There's a wooden plank that's connecting where the elevator is hanging to the stone tower. Now, the description of the stone tower, without going over it several times like I had to, is a little bit confusing, but this is the best way that I can think of to describe it. If you think of a glass, sort of in the way that the listeners can't see this, but your glass right here.
Just a normal
If you just
cup.
think of that, if you just think of that as the shape of the tower, and then coming out from it is the wooden plank to the hanging elevator, And then on the inside of the cup is a spiraling staircase that spirals around the edge to the bottom. And at the bottom of the cup is where the labyrinth that we end up at is.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the way it describes it in the book is an inside-out Tower of Babel. And so it's like, I don't even know what the Tower of Babel looks like, let alone inside out.
Yeah, aside from like the description that I heard of the Tower of Babel, the one time that I read the Bible, I really didn't know what the Tower of Babel was supposed to look. And I don't even know that it has a description. It's been so long it may not. But, like everything from the Bible and old stuff like that, there have been artist depictions and things like that Richard is probably referencing.
Richard also, classic Richard, he always has to say the wrong thing at the wrong time. When they're going down in the elevator, Richard, he's just like, now would be a very bad time to discover that one was claustrophobic, wouldn't it? Yes, said Dor. Then I won't, said Richard. And then they went down. It's just, okay, Richard.
Right.
But,
so they get out of the elevator. They're walking across the wooden ledge to get to the tower. Mm-hmm. Richard freezes. We remember that he's bad at heights from the first meeting with Old Bailey whenever he and Carabas go up the ladder that exited from a sewer to the rooftops.
He also reminds us.
Yeah. Ultimately, he can't cross and he's freaking out. Hunter goes back to help him out. They continue down the stairs.
The reason the bridge was so scary to cross too was because somebody had pressed the button for the elevator back up top.
Yeah.
So when the elevator started going back up, it started making the bridge a little rickety and rockety, and
yeah, exactly.
So he had to go across immediately, and then that's when Hunter comes in and saves the day. And
so then they just continue down the stairs. They're walking for a little bit. Slowly, Richard and Lamia have fallen behind Dora and Hunter, kind of just like separated. They're walking slower for whatever reason. Not for whatever reason, it's because this is Lamia's design. Lamia has, they're talking about, they're just talking. Eventually, Lamia asks for some of Richard's heat.
Lamia ran a cold finger down his cheek. "You're so warm," she said admiringly. "Must be wonderful to have so much warmth." And then Lamia looked him up and down, pleading sweetly. "Would you give me some of your heat, Richard?" she asked. "I'm so cold."
Richard doesn't really know what's going on. He's obviously under her seduction stuff that's happening right now, so he can't really think. There's a part where it says that something inside of him is screaming not to go along with it, but he can't help. So he's like, yeah, well, it doesn't say, yeah, take my heat. He just nods, and then she starts making out with him and taking all his heat.
Noshing. And
then we cut to Carabas, who arrives, sees what's happening, and stops Lamia.
One cool thing about when Richard lost his heat, it seemed as though he was getting frozen. Like his eyes, he couldn't blink. He just started to get like an ultimate chill up his body, and like kind of froze him like still. And then you're right, when Carabas sees that, he I don't know, does he run up on her? He seized her hard by the neck and lifted her off the ground. "Give it back," he rasped in her ear. "Give him his life back." The velvet reacted like a kitten who had just been dropped into a bathtub, wriggling and hissing and spitting and scratching. It did her no good. She was held tight by the throat.
Carabas forces her to give the heat back. She gives it all back, and then Carabas tells her to go away, don't ever go near him again. Mm-hmm. After that, Richard is talking to Carabas. "We were expecting to see you at the market." "Yes, well, some people thought I was dead. I was forced to keep a low profile." Why did some people think you were dead?" The Marquis looked at Richard with eyes that had seen too much and gone too far. "Because they killed me," he said. "Come on, the others can't be too far ahead."
And this is right when, so like in the book, there's not a break, but in the audiobook, so at timestamp 9 hours, 53 minutes, and 47 seconds, it blows out with this song that they always throw in. It's like the ba ba ba. I don't even know what the song is right now, but if y'all want to hear the song, I think that's a weird spot to throw it in because it is not a break in the in the book. But it does kind of change perspective because that's when Richard goes. I think they're going. Richard just looks off and starts to. Yeah, he looked over the side of the path across the tunnel where he could see Dora and Hunter.
And they notice that Krupp and Vandemar are lying in wait on the level below them. So Carabas says, "Go, warn them. I can't run yet, so go ahead." So Richard catches up. It's too late. Krupp and Vandemar appear, and then Richard says, "Hunter, now," or something, to that effect, like, "do something." And then
Hunter, quickly.
And then Hunter betrays the party, or reveals that she's, the mole that was Krupp had said existed earlier, and all that sort of thing. Kicks Richard to knock him down, And then Krupp reveals that Hunter agreed to work for their boss before agreeing to work for Door, which makes the whole thing with Varney make no sense at all.
To remind you guys, Varney is the guy that they hired to be to audition to be her bodyguard. Yeah. So if they already had Hunter, yeah, they should have just sent her.
It doesn't make sense.
She was going to make it.
Because they make it seem that Islington hires Hunter without consulting Krupp and Vandermeer.
Got it.
Or at least maybe not consulting, like maybe let them know or something like that. But it doesn't make sense that Islington would order them to hire somebody to become Door's bodyguard when he had already hired somebody to become Door's bodyguard.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's laying... I mean, I honestly think it was a little bit of a slip-up on the writing,
It's... And along with a couple of other things that happened later, it is definitely just a slip-up of, in my opinion, just a slip-up of writing, or not even a slip-up, but a little bit of laziness or giving up whenever you have found yourself to be in like a weird hole with your writing where you can't figure out how to reconcile two things, and then you just say, well, fuck it, like just whatever, it is what it is. Because there's different things that I've read and different games that I've played where things, whenever everything is supposed to start coming together at the end, it doesn't come together quite right because the writing that happened prior to it wasn't laid out well. The example that I like to use most whenever I'm thinking about this sort of thing, there's a game that came out a long time ago, well now a long time ago, it's not actually super long ago, called Heavy Rain on the PlayStation 3. And what that is it's a narrative from 4 different perspectives about a murderer, a serial killer, and one of the characters is a detective. And so you spend a lot of time as the detective going, through his story and trying to figure everything out. And then at the end of the game, it turns out he's the serial killer. So this whole time, you're in the detective's head, hearing his thoughts about all the clues that he's finding, like, oh, maybe the killer uses this kind of typewriter, blah, blah, blah. But he's the fucking thing. So why is his thoughts that you're in his head with not him being like, oh, I should use this typewriter next time, or I should change typewriters to throw them off my trail. It's a total betrayal of story and a total betrayal of the reader. And that's the sort of stuff that this is, and I hate that.
Yeah, no, I see that a little bit, because the only justification I can kind of see for Islington hiring Hunter and not telling them is just that maybe Islington doesn't fully trust Krupp and Vandermeer, so maybe she's trying to throw them off, or sorry, I don't know why I keep calling it he or she, but maybe it was trying to throw Krupp and Vandermeer off, maybe it was just trying to add a little bit more, because there had to be some sort of conflict and somebody that we hated, so that when Hunter came in and kicked ass, we fell in love with Hunter.
Yeah, that's a device for getting us on their side.
Exactly.
Not a device for a sensible story.
Right. Islington wouldn't do that to get a reader for the future when it goes down in history to...
Right. It's just, for all that I can figure out and think of, it's cheap. And it doesn't work.
One cool thing that happened, well, not cool, just silly, and showed Krupp and Vandermeer being silly. Mr. Krupp was saying to Door, just think of us as an escort service. Oh. And then Mr. Vandermeer says, only without the bosoms. And he sounded ever so slightly embarrassed. Mr. Krupp turned to Mr. Vandermeer. Escort in the sense of accompany, Mr. Vandermeer. Ensure our fair lady gets where she's going in safely. I am comparing you neither to a lady of the evening nor a common street harlot. Mr. Vandermeer was unmollified. Said we were an escort service. He muttered. Know what that is. Strike it from the record, Mr. Vandermeer. I misspoke myself. Let us from henceforth be chaperones, guards, accompanists. Anyway.
Yeah.
They're just silly. I
so
like them
weird.
a lot.
Yeah. They're like almost comic relief, and oftentimes in slightly inappropriate situations where it would maybe be served to be in a different spot than it is. I don't know.
No, I agree.
I never fully know how I feel about their weird dialogue. Sometimes it's perfect and, fits whatever situation they're in perfectly, but sometimes it's just, it seems like it could have been in a different spot to greater effect. But anyways.
Yeah, where'd we leave off?
So then, now that Hunter's revealed her betrayal and they talk about, the thing we already talked about, Varney, Krupp asks for the key from the Blackfriars. Richard says he has it, he is bluffing. He isn't expecting it, but he finds a key in his back pocket. He assumes it's from his old flat, and he holds it out. Croup takes the key and immediately sees through the bluff, hands it to Vandemar to show him, and then Vandemar destroys the key and then hurts Richard, starts kicking him and just beating on him.
Yeah, it appeared to be a lecture in kicking. So it was a fun little read just because he was saying, you kick someone here and it hurts really bad, but you have to kick them really hard here for it to hurt the same amount. And it was just, it didn't even sound like it made any sense because the second kick sounded like it hurt way more. But
yeah, I think what he's doing there is he's just describing, or he's giving a lecture in his mastery of torture, where he says something like, people think it's how hard you kick, but it's where you kick. Gotcha. And then as an example, he says, see, if I kick you here, it hurts this bad. If I kick you here, I have to hit you twice as hard to make it hurt the same level. So he's just describing, the precision with which you should torture. This gets Dor to admit that she has the key to stop them from continuing to hurt Richard. Before they leave, Hunter asks about her payment. Croup hands her a long fishing pole case, and then they leave. Hunter is opening the case. Richard is making a pretty sweet Judas Iscariot reference with the 30 pieces of silver.
Who's Judas Iscariot? What is that?
Judas Iscariot is the disciple that betrays Jesus to the Pharisees.
Okay, there we go.
For 30 pieces of silver.
Yeah, well, that's appropriate because we learn here in a second that the weapon is a spear. So that made me just automatically think of a spear of destiny.
Yeah. And it's the spear that is referenced earlier whenever they first meet Serpentine. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like offhandedly like, yeah, you're going to need the spear if you want to kill the beast.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. Hunter is like losing it over the spear. She's way into it.
I was so into it.
Because she's a hunter. Richard asks who Hunter is working for, which is when Carabas shows up with a crossbow that he got from who knows where, telling Hunter to spill the beans. Hunter says it's Islington. Carabas instructs Richard to pick up the spear and Hunter to walk in front. They continue down the stairs.
Yeah, Richard's like, why are we taking her with us? He's like, would you rather her be behind us? It's like, well, no. Yeah, right. She's a really good hunter. And then Richard is kind of like bummed out. He's like, you could kill her. And then the Marquis says, I will if there are no other alternatives. But I would hate to remove an option before it was entirely necessary. Anyway, death is so final, isn't it? And then Richard goes, is it? And then the Marquis, like, sometimes, said the Marquis. And then they go down.
And that's the end of that chapter. Now we're on to chapter 16.
Whoop.
They are walking for hours. They reach the end of the stairs and arrive at a labyrinth. There's a reference to King Bran the Blessed, who is a king of Britain and Welsh lore. And then there's also a reference to...
A real king?
No.
Okay.
And there may have at some point been a King Bran or something like that, but the Bran the Blessed is a king in Welsh lore specifically.
What is Welsh lore? Sorry.
So Wales is one of the several countries that make up the United Kingdom.
Oh, okay.
And they have their own lore from their culture.
Oh, and it's called Welsh. Okay.
And then there's also in that same sentence a reference to Gog and Magog, which are different religious references. There's Gog and Magog are referenced in the Bible a couple times, and then referenced in Jewish or in Judaism. And then, but in the book, Richard is thinking, he talks about Gog and Magog, the giants, which are a story in like English folklore or something like that. Mm-hmm. No, it just doesn't make any sense because Gog and Magog aren't themselves anything, at least that I could find, an actual story. There is a giant in English lore called Gog Magog, just combining the two. But the Gog and Magog are things that exist in different religions' history, and so I think, or at least in what I could find as well, and what other people have decided has happened, was that they just got referenced together because they were so similar in name, and they get mixed up sometimes. When in fact, now somebody has decided to come out and say that, or some linguist, historian, says that Gog Magog, the single giant in the English history or in lore or whatever, is actually a corruption of a different like Welsh word or something like that.
Okay.
And so the book or the writing is inaccurate for what the legend is trying to reference is, but it's accurate in its inaccuracy, which I just thought was really interesting.
Yeah, that's funny.
That it was right about being wrong.
So Gog and Magog, that's not like David and Goliath, right? Was that dude's name Goliath?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's lame. Okay. I was hoping he was Gog the Goliath or something.
In the Bible, Gog and Magog are things that we don't know what they are. We don't know that they're people or places or one of each.
Giants building a gate?
No, not in the Bible. There's the first time that it gets referenced is in a book in I guess it's the Torah in Judaism, and then it's also referenced in the book of Revelation, where after Satan finishes his 1,000 years imprisonment, he'll return to the world and deceive it. It says something like Satan will deceive the four corners of the world, Gog and Magog, and raise an army to fight the armies of heaven or whatever. But there's never any explanation as to what Gog and Magog are as far as the Bible goes. They just references it, and obviously those things were written forever ago, so there's no way to dig back and find everything. It's just weird.
1,000 years doesn't sound that long.
For
an immortal.
Yeah, but so we don't know when the 1,000 years started necessarily or ended necessarily. And the end of the 1,000 years doesn't necessarily mean that at that end, that's when the apocalypse happens.
Okay.
He's going to take his time to deceive everything and build up his deal, because several hundred years is nothing for an immortal to figure out how he's going to overthrow, whatever.
I mean, they were living to 900 in the New Testament, so it's just
in the Old Testament.
That's what I meant. And what's the first book?
Genesis.
Yeah, in Genesis.
Yeah, Adam and Eve lived for 8 million years old or whatever. And then even after that, several generations lived for a very long time, according to the books. But
enough about the Bible.
Yeah, we're going down a wormhole.
Yeah,
or a rabbit hole is the actual phrase. So
they're traveling down, and then they see a gate. So this gate marks the end of Down Street and the beginning of the labyrinth. And beyond the labyrinth waits Angel Islington, and in the labyrinth is the beast. And so, I don't understand, said Richard. Islington, I actually met him. Him. He's an angel. I mean, a real angel. The Marquis smiled without humor. When angels go bad, Richard, they go worse than anyone. Remember, Lucifer used to be an angel. Sorry, I tried to do a raspy voice because he got his throat slit.
No, yeah. So they're still talking. They're talking about the beasts, like with the excerpt that you just took, and getting around the labyrinth. Hunter talks about how they can't navigate the labyrinth without Islington's token, and then that's when Carabas shows the one that he took from Portico Study, which apparently he didn't lose that when the sewer folk took everything from his corpse.
He had that one in a butt pocket, probably. The prison pocket.
The prison pocket.
But, there was one little thing that I wanted to point out right before that. Richard tells the Marquis that he has been having dreams of the beast, and the Marquis raises an eyebrow. What kind of dreams? And then Richard says bad ones. But anyway, the Marquis didn't know that he was dreaming about the beast.
Yeah, Richard hadn't told anybody about it.
Yeah, and then
I don't think he knew, and he didn't. I think that this was the first time that Richard hears about the beast.
Yeah, okay, so Richard hadn't known what he was dreaming about. And then also, too, the Marquis, the Marquis thought about this, eyes flickering, and then he said, "Look, Richard, I'm taking Hunter. But if you want to wait here, well, no one could accuse you of cowardice." Richard shook his head. "Sometimes there's nothing you can do. I'm not turning back. Not now. They've got door."
They go into the labyrinth using the token that Carabas managed to hold on to because of plot. We jump to door. They're navigating the labyrinth, avoiding the beast. The token works by sort of vibrating in the direction that you're supposed to go, and apparently wards off the beast as well. There's a short interaction where where Croup is kind of visibly unsure about what's going on, and Dor kind of picks up on it, and so then starts kind of teasing him about it, trying to, just get under his skin and hopefully creating assumedly creating an avenue for escape.
Mm-hmm.
A part of that dialogue where she says something like, what are you even scheming to do right now? Are you going to kidnap Islington and me for whatever your next thing is?
Yeah, what are you planning now? To kidnap Islington? Sell us both to the highest bidder? Quiet, said Mr. Vandemar, but Mr. Croup simply chuckled, and Dor knew then that the angel Islington was not her friend.
So now she's realized that Islington is a bad dude.
A baddie.
Potentially, I mean, it doesn't give us her full thoughts, but she knows that much. Mm-hmm. So we can assume that she now knows that is the hiring party. And then we cut to Islington, who is singing.
Oh, well, she starts calling for the Beast to scare him and try to get the Beast to kill him.
Yeah, she starts shouting.
And then they gag her. And they had this really weird line about how Mr. Vandemar used a handkerchief from the 1820s. It was just excessive.
Spent such a bizarre amount of time describing that.
I know. Sorry, yeah, and then Angel Islington was just jamming out in his halls. He's really having a great day.
Yeah, he's got the radio up. It's good stuff. He's cleaning, getting ready for the party to begin.
Then he goes to Richard having a mental diary. So I was wrong. He does one more mental diary, right. But it is completely pointless. He can't even string two words together. It seems like he loses his train of thought several times, and then it even says metaphors failed him, and he had gone beyond the world of metaphor and simile into a place of things that are, and it was changing him. So
while they're traveling, Carabas is holding out the token, and they talk about it a little bit. As they talk about it, Carabas ends up dropping it into a marsh that they're walking through. He can't bend down to find it where he dropped it because he's got to keep his crossbow trained on Hunter. And
he just stepped on a rib cage that was
that's what makes him drop it.
He wounded himself.
And so then he's like, Richard, come up and find it because I got to watch Hunter. And so then Richard's trying to find it. He finds it, but the marsh swallows it. So then, of course, because this is how plot goes, as they lose it, the Beast shows up.
Yeah.
And Hunter's like, hell yeah, that's what we've been waiting for. So she goes and she grabs the spear that Richard, left laying or standing in the
I don't know why you'd do that, but whatever.
Well, he had to get down and in the mud and try to find the thing. So she goes over, picks up the spear, and is like, all right, I'm going to fucking kill this thing, because that's all she wants.
Ooh, can I read this real quick?
Yeah.
So when the Beast comes up, there's this really cool, this is probably the coolest line I thought about how epic the Beast was. So just imagine the biggest, baddest boar, like how they described it kind of earlier. And then here, right before it meets them, it says, it stared at them, and it paused for 100 years, which transpired in 12 heartbeats. Just that, to me, I can completely put myself in that situation. I've definitely been in some situations where it's like, that felt like forever. And I know it was just like a quick glance or whatever, know, and it was just, this Beast was staring him down with some freaking hockey, That's from One Piece, sorry.
An anime I haven't seen.
But
I've seen some of it back. We've talked about this. I've seen that show and I just don't fucking get it.
Yeah.
I can't get into that thing.
Anyway, the Beast charges. You explained it. Well, you did a better job, I thought, in the demo. Or sorry, our practice run of the Beast.
Going through the notes. The Beast charges. Hunter is all about it, ready to fight the boar, the Beast, the thing, and loses. She lunges at it, realizes that she's too late, and then the boar gores her and then takes off.
She loses exactly how Richard loses in every single dream he has. Just a second too late with this spear.
Yeah. And he gets gored by the tusk.
And then he gets gored. Yeah.
And that's what happens to Hunter. At this time, we cut to Dora's group. They have reached the end of the labyrinth. Krupp is visibly happy that they've gotten through it because he was definitely afraid of the Beast.
Yes.
Never admittedly, but we could tell with the description.
Oh, yeah.
So they get to it and they enter. They talk to Islington through a mirror that he's got on the front door.
Yeah, mirror on the wall.
They're like, hey, we got everything. And he's like, all right, cool, come in. And so they go in. And then we cut back to Richard's group.
Richard and the gang.
Hunter's down. They're talking. Hunter tells Richard to take the spear. He's like, nah, I can't, what do you want me to do? Blah, blah, blah. Hunter's like, well, I can't do it. I'm pretty hurt. She stands up and she does this weird thing where she starts humming to find the resonance of the passageway.
I thought that was really cool, to be honest with you.
Yeah, at first I didn't really get it, but then on the second read through, I was like, oh, okay, she's finding the right frequency that she should shout at to make sure that the Beast hears. Mm. So she finds the note, shouts at that note, I guess, and for the Beast to come, the Beast acquiesces. And then it charges as she's letting herself be the distraction. This whole time in getting up and talking, she's saying, I did a really bad thing and now I'm going to atone. So she's sacrificing herself so that Richard has a chance to lunge with the spear.
Yeah, this time there could be no room for mistakes. The dance, thought Hunter, the dance is not yet over. As the Beast came toward her, its horns lowered, she shouted, now, Richard, strike! Under and up, now, before the beast hit her, and her words turned into a wordless scream.
So Richard stabs, gets it, nails it. The beast dies.
Yeah, the beast was so close he could smell the shit and blood animal stench of it. So close he could feel its warmth. And Richard stabbed with his spear as hard as he could, pushing up into its side and letting it sink in. And then, the boar's dead.
Yeah, boar's dead. Dies on top of Hunter.
Boar's head.
So then Richard goes to try to help Hunter. He doesn't, in the way that he's been this whole time, sort of naive and unused to death, doesn't want Hunter to die despite everything that's happened. But Hunter's dying.
And as she gives him her knife, she rewards him with her knife.
Yeah, it says, "You're the warrior. You are the greatest hunter in London below now," because he killed the boar.
Yeah, so clean my blood off her. Mustn't rust the blade. A hunter always looks after her weapons. She gulped air. Now, touch the beast's blood to your eyes and tongue. Richard did not like the sound of that. Yeah. And then the Marquis like, no, do it.
Yeah, for whatever reason, they know that this is what you have to do to navigate the labyrinth.
I assume it's some fun hunter magic that if there were series to this world, we'd probably learn about. But I like to think it's some...
I could guess that it's probably, like a known thing, not necessarily like a hunter spell, but hunters know that if you can learn a beast's lair by taking some of it into you.
That's cool.
In effect or something like that. That's the only thing I can assume, because they both are just like, yeah, obviously you do that, Richard. What's wrong with you? So he does it, and Carabas is like, go ahead. I can't move very quickly, but now that you know the way, you can get there and get there a lot quicker.
Yeah, Richard's worried about leaving Hunter's body, but
Carabas is like, well, what are we going to do?
Yeah, we're not going to take it
with us,
so
we'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
So Richard takes off. He's traveling by himself, reaches the end of the labyrinth. When he gets there, for whatever reason, the doors are already unlocked, or they respond to him, so he enters Islington's halls. And that's the end of chapter 16.
Yeah, it sounds like Richard just leveled up and is now Super Richard.
Super Richard, yeah.
By chapter
just
17.
That beast blood.
Beast blood.
Gave him some extra XP. Mm-hmm. Chapter 17. Richard's walking through Islington's halls, goes to the room where everybody's at. There's some discussion about Dora not being cooperative, and how Richard would be great for torturing to get Dora to talk. Islington says that someone else is here. Croup, go find out who it is. So at this point, we now know that the door probably wasn't just unlocked. Islington was like, all right, Richard's here. I'll open up the door and he can come in.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Mr. Vandemar broke Richard's finger, and just to try and influence Dora into being more cooperative, because they knew they couldn't torture Dora into doing it. And then, that's when Islington's like, there's somebody outside.
There's a lot of, during this discussion, there's a lot of sort of reinforcing some of the opinions that I have about Islington, where he's not evil. He's just corrupted himself with his revenge, which we'll find out some more about it a little bit later. But he's got a goal that he's let himself be corrupted by. But he's still he can't say that they're going to torture Dora. He has to stop himself. He can't stomach it almost. Mm-hmm. And anytime Croup and Vandemar are talking about it, or anything like that, he turns away, doesn't look at them or anything like that, or stops them and is like, but enough of that, we're going to talk about something else. I've got something else I want to say. Yeah. So he's definitely still an angel. He's just got some corrupted ideals that he wants to follow. Yeah. But anyways, so then Croup goes off to find out who it is that's at the door, where we cut to Carabas, who's standing outside trying to figure out what the fuck to do. He's trying to come up with a million different schemes, but nothing is good enough. He knows that he doesn't really have anything given his current state.
Except for surprise that's on his side. That's the only trick. He said at least, he thought, slightly cheered, he had surprise on his side.
That was until he felt the cold point of a sharp knife placed on the side of his throat, and he heard Mr. Croup's oily voice whispering in his ear. I already killed you once today, it was saying. What does it take to teach some people?
I like that. I already killed you once today, it was saying.
Yeah, because he never saw Mr. Croup, because Croup just vanished from our previous perspective, and then just appears, because he has some teleportation thing that they've now referenced a couple of times.
Yeah, I just like
they
that
always say a shimmer was in the world, and then he was gone. That's how they always word it.
I just like that he thought it. It's not even a dude.
Yeah, because he never hears Croup's voice. He just hears, he never sees Croup is what I meant to say. He just suddenly hears Croup's voice, and so his only point of reference is it. Interesting.
So then we cut back to Richard, who has been chained up, and I believe Dora's chained up still too.
Yeah, Door's still chained up.
Yeah, so Richard and Door are now chained up, and then Mr. Croup brings in the Marquis.
Islington's like, I thought you killed him, and they're like, we did, and just like some back and forth about all that stuff. So then now is a bunch of dialogue. This is a big exposition scene, as there often is before the major climax, where everything sort of gets revealed and explained, some answers are given, and then the big event will happen. So that's what we're in right now.
Yeah. The pain in Richard's hand showed no indication of subsiding. How can you behave like this? He asked angrily. You're an angel. And then the Marquis goes, what did I tell you, Richard? And Richard thought, you said Lucifer was an angel. Islington smiled superciliously. Lucifer, it said. Lucifer was an idiot. It wound up lord and master of nothing at all. So it's like, not only are they similar, but Islington finds itself much above the silly, stupid Lucifer. We learn too that Islington is at fault for sinking Atlantis.
I don't think that he's at fault for the sinking. He's at fault for not doing enough to prevent it. There's still... So they talk about that. The Marquis grinned, and you wound up Lord and Master of 2 thugs and a room full of candles in response to him talking about Lucifer. And then that's when we go into this discussion about Atlantis. The angel licked its lips. They told me it was my punishment for Atlantis. I told them there was nothing more I could have done. The whole affair was, and then regrettable. Or unfortunate, as we said. So Atlantis sunk, and it seemed to be a result of something that happened, which we never get an answer for. And Islington just didn't do enough to stop it.
Well, I don't know, man, because right here, so it says, Islington claps his hands, and he said, these things happen. And the Marquis is like, of course they do. Cities sink every day, and you had nothing to do it. It was as if the lid had been pulled off something dark and writhing, a place of derangement and fury and utter viciousness. And in a time of scary things, it was the most frightening thing Richard had seen. The angel's serene beauty cracked. Its eyes flashed, and it screamed at them, crazy, scary, and uncontrolled, utterly certain in its rightness. They deserved it.
I think that, so at least what I think that happened, my interpretation of this whole interaction, is that whatever it was that caused Atlantis to sink was part of some either single or series of transgressions against Islington as well.
Probably.
And so whenever it was coming up, Islington maybe saw his opportunity to prevent the island from sinking and was like, no, fuck you guys, you deserve this.
Oh, okay.
And so...
Maybe, yeah, I guess like with God and fucking Noah's Ark, he's like, bye, you guys suck, Noah and his family are pretty good, I guess.
And that's what I think. And then also with what we were just mentioning, where he's still an angel, like he can't talk about the torture, he's still like kind of inertly... He's not inertly good, but he's just not evil. Mm-hmm. He's just angry at being imprisoned because he doesn't think that he was wrong in letting the Atlanteans get what he believes they deserved. Mm-hmm. While he may have been looking over the island, they were pissing him off for whatever reason. And then something that they did led to their island sinking, and he just didn't stop it.
Gotcha.
That's the way that I see it, at least.
I don't know. The way I interpreted it was... I guess in the back of my mind, I might have assumed that they had something against him or he didn't like something they were doing, But it made it seem like he was totally into it and maybe had a hand in it, if not doing it himself. I mean, definitely having a hand in it would be not doing anything, know? But I see what you're saying. I just took it as more attack rather than
And in the light of the way that I see it, him like losing it there and saying they deserved it is him like losing it, because how many times do I have to fucking say this?
I see. Okay, okay.
They deserved it. They did this and blah, 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 blah. So he like loses his composure for a bit because he's so over having to try and defend himself to the point where he's now, like we already mentioned, corrupted himself, and his idea is to go take over heaven and show them, give them what now he thinks they deserve.
I gotcha.
So it's all about, even if he's wrong, he believes that he's without fault.
He believes, yeah. I mean, just like Hitler believed what he was doing was good for
Germany. I mean, you never think you're the bad guy, right? You never think you're the bad guy unless you're in a story and described as actually evil. Yeah. Like, only demons know that they're actually demons.
Yeah, they seem into it, though. So, Dor ends up speaking up in part of this conversation, and she said, then why did you have us killed? Islington answers, not all of you. So it alludes to there being some of Dor's family... maybe one person, maybe multiple of the Dorr family still alive.
Yeah,
we don't know
and
who,
this is
but,
where earlier we made in a previous episode, I can't remember how far back it was now, but we made a prediction that her younger sister was probably still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Because they alluded to it then as well.
Yeah.
So that's what we can assume it is here. So then this is basically the end of all the exposition. Allington's like, all right, so are you going to open the door? And then Richard's like, what do you think she's going to open the door after everything you've done to her?
Yeah, she's got more resolve than that.
Yeah, and then Krupa's like, tells Vandermeer to go start torturing Richard because that's the key to getting Dorr to cooperate.
Right. Oh, there was a little scene too right in the middle of that where Dorr was like, my father told me I could trust you. What happened?
Yeah, we totally skipped that. Let's go back to that.
And then, so at that point we learned that Krupp and Vandermeer had tampered with the diary. I think it was a video diary that her dad left, Portico. Mm-hmm. And I can't do Portico's voice, but Vandermeer does a perfect imitation of Portico's voice. And he says what was actually in the video, and it was, Dorr, child, fear Islington. Islington's got to be behind all of this. It's dangerous. Dorr, keep away from it.
Yeah. And so then that's when we find out, or at least we can suspect as much whenever they're sleeping and Dorr has that dream and she realizes that she's kind of upset about who put away the diary because we had to find it.
Right. Yeah. Dad wouldn't have put it away. Yeah.
After he died. So
after he died.
So this is where it becomes fully revealed that it was Krupp and Vandermeer. They edited the diary and then they put it back to be hidden.
Those guys are smart.
Yeah,
they seem to have some technological skills that I could not even begin to understand. Like, how did they change the video diary?
Right.
But
So yeah,
hurt him some more, Mr. Vandermeer. Cut off his ear.
Vandermeer starts to do that. For a second, Richard thinks he can maybe take it. But then whenever it actually starts screaming. And so then Dorr immediately says, stop it, I'll open the door.
Yeah, see, I originally thought that Mr. Vandermeer had cut Richard's ear off, but here at the end, Will showed me that it says, then Mr. Vandermeer put a little pressure on the knife, and Richard began to scream. Immediately after a door goes, stop them, said Dorr, I'll open your door. Yeah.
Because while Krupp and Vandermeer are certainly capable of just taking someone's ear off in one go, that's not torture.
Yeah, just in my mind, I thought it was just like a razor-sharp blade, so I was thinking a hot knife through butter, just slicing up through Richard's ear, and I figured it was kind of a Fred and George Weasley kind of... Which one lost their ear? Fred, right? George. Fred. Fred lost his ear. I'm going to stick to Fred.
I certainly don't know.
If I'm wrong, you call me out. Tweet at me, or tweet at us. Tell me I'm wrong. Jordan is wrong, but yeah, I think it was Fred because the long name kid was left for whatever reason in my mind. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah, a different book.
Allington releases Dorr's hand manacles so that she can move about. Gives her back the key to open up the door. Dorr goes and reveals the keyhole. Enters or puts the key into the keyhole and begins to open it.
Don't do it. Don't set it free. We don't matter, called Richard. Actually, said the Marquis, I matter very much. Yeah. But I have to agree, don't do it.
That's easily the Marquis' best line.
Yeah, that was the best. But she put the key in the keyhole and started opening it. And
it's taking forever. It's like super heavy, which we find out why it's super heavy.
Yeah.
She's pulling it open. As she's pulling it open, Allington's preparing to leave, to go back to heaven and take over. Makes a funny comment about how he's going to start with Gabriel.
But also, too, in the meantime, Richard and the Marquis are talking to Krupp and Vandermeer, and they're like, hey, are you going to let him go without paying you guys yet? I mean, and then Krupp has a funny little line where he says the corpses to be have a point. Sir, it might be wise for you to settle up before you commence the next stage of your travels. And anyway, I just thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, there is some funny back and forth there between them all as they're sort of realizing, oh wait, he's leaving without paying us. What's going on?
Yeah.
And then they're like egging them on to go.
Go figure that out, guys. You can kill us later.
the one that I like from that section is whenever they're Islington's like, he just doesn't care because he never intended to pay them anything, but he's like just trying to like placate them to get them to shut up so he can continue. He's like, whenever I have my throne, you'll have whatever, blah blah blah. And then Richard's like, jam tomorrow, eh?
Yeah.
Don't like jam, said Mr. Vandermeer. Makes me belch. It's just goofy.
Yeah,
so
they're funny.
So then they're walking over towards Islington, trying to confront him about the pay. And then that's when Dorr finishes opening the door. And it's an explosion of light because it's a star or an event horizon, something space-y. There's a void there.
Richard squinted his eyes and turned his head away from the glare, all vicious orange and retinal purple. Is that what heaven looks like? It seems more like hell. And then he felt the wind.
The wind pulls through. It's the void of space. So it's a vacuum is what it is. It doesn't describe it as a vacuum, but it's pretty evident that's what it is. As everything is starting to get sucked in, Richard, Carabas, and Dor are held by their chains, so they're okay, at least for the moment. Allington grabs a pillar as he gets sucked by. Vandemar grasps a table leg, and then Krupp grabs Vandemar.
I just figured Dor was okay because she's probably hiding behind the door.
Because her feet are still manacled.
Oh, there we go. Okay, that makes more sense.
While they're all being like sucked and holding on to whatever it is that they have, Allington's screaming about how it's not heaven. Dor says it wasn't the real key that she used, and it was a copy that she had the hammersmith make at the market. But it opened the door, screamed the angel. No, said the girl with the opal eyes distantly. I opened a door, as far and hard away as I could. I opened a door.
That was a really cool line. She's just like, I got you.
Allington begins to plead with Dor to close the door, says her sister is still alive. The angel can't hold on, though, and is sucked through. Krupp is crawling up Vandemar towards Dor, talking about killing her, finishing the job.
Oh, yeah, because they got stuck, actually, in the door, because they're holding on to
the table leg that they're
table.
holding on breaks off and gets wedged in the door, and then he's like, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to finish the job, blah, blah, blah. But then Vandemar's coat gives way, and so Krupp falls into the star.
Flies off into the void.
Vandemar shrugs and lets go. Just following Krupp.
Bye-bye, he said, and let go of the table leg. And then a little line that Richard thinks, it made sort of sense, Richard thought. They were a team, after all. You know?
The air is running out in the room, the building, the labyrinth, the bottom of Down Street. Richard is about to pass out. Somehow the door closes. Well, we don't know why.
I thought Dor closed it.
Nah. It doesn't say that she does.
Oh, really?
The door just closes, and then Richard can hear Dor talking. She says, she has like a line about, or no, not even her. She doesn't start it. Carabas is like, how did you, where did you open that door to? What was that? And Dor just says, just as far as I could. I don't know.
Literally as far away as I could.
Yeah, there's no explanation about how the door closed. Maybe ultimately the void was able to suck the doors closed as well.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
That's
after
the only
you said that Dor
that I
didn't.
can figure out. But
I could have sworn Dor closed it, but I could have just made that up in my head. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Either way, the door gets closed, and
so then Dor ends up releasing her chains, and then goes to Carabas and Richard to release theirs.
Yeah, everyone's pooped out.
Asleep.
Yeah, everyone's pooped and takes a nap. End of the chapter.
Yeah, end of the chapter. Chapter 18's next. Quick baseball update. We're at the end of the third, and the Red Sox lead the Yankees 3-0.
That's good, right? You like the Red Sox? We just determined that.
It is good. I'm also way more afraid of the Astros playing the Yankees than I am the Red Sox.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. It's a win-win. All right, chapter 18, my favorite, shortest chapter. It's all about Lady Serpentine.
Yeah, really nothing happens. It's a description of the people that Serpentine's walking through the labyrinth with and their journey through the labyrinth. They come upon the beast's corpse, they collect Hunter's corpse, and they also collect the spear, and then they disappear.
Yeah, this. So it does say, too, this is the farthest away from home that Serpentine, however you say it, this is the furthest away from home that she had ever been in a long time. She brings the spear, which sounds like a win in her book. She loses Hunter, who she seemed to be almost in love with, if not have just strong feelings for.
Yeah.
A love of maybe kinship, rather than necessarily in love. But
it definitely seemed really lustful.
Yeah, it did. She was kind of
first talking.
Yeah, she was touching all over Hunter. But anyway, the last sentence of this little chapter 18 was, the lamplight flickered on Serpentine's ravaged face as she walked, but it revealed no emotion of any kind, neither happy nor sad. So that's, I think, how she's just coping. She's just can't even express any emotion. Then I've been there. I know how to cope like that too.
Well, I think she's also a character that's sort of beyond humanity. Mm-hmm. I can assume that she's been alive for a really long time, and she's probably dealt with similar things before, and so this is just another day in her very long life.
And doesn't it say that she's the second oldest of the seven sisters? I thought she was the oldest, but then later it seems like it says that she's the second oldest.
I don't know. I didn't pay attention to that little detail if it does show it.
Yeah, well, it doesn't really matter. She's old, and we know it. So, Yeah, that's the end. Is literally
that's the whole chapter 18.
It's a 2-page, 1-page chapter. So on to 19.
Chapter 19. Richard wakes up in the Abbey of the Blackfriars. Richard is asking the monk that's with him some stuff, but the guy that's with him doesn't have a whole lot of answers. Just like, you're in the Abbey of the Blackfriars. We took care of you. And then the abbot shows up.
Yeah, the abbot shows up on the arm of Brother Fuliginus. You can't stop talking about him. He's the reason we got it.
So then Richard starts walking with the abbot, looking for Dor, or the abbot's taking Richard to Dor. They go to where Dor has been hanging out in her room, and she's reading Mansfield Park, the book that she was reading at Richard's apartment.
Yeah, Richard was almost positive that they didn't have that book at the friar's place. So
that they didn't know they had that book until she found it.
Well,
in the same way that he didn't know he had that book until she found it at his place.
So she just probably opens a door and keeps it in her library.
Maybe.
She's just in the middle of reading that book.
Right.
Never gets a chance to finish it. She's so busy.
Carabas gets wheeled in on a wheelchair. They all go to a room to talk.
It spends a little while explaining how badass he looks coming in on a wheelchair too, which I don't know if that happens super often, but
it's just sort of like and I've seen this sort of like description for other characters of Carabas's style, where they're kind of just like effortlessly cool, or even full effort cool. Like they put a lot of effort into being cool or whatever. Because it says something like he wasn't sure how Carabas managed to make being wheeled in on a wheelchair romantic and
romantic and swashbuckling.
Swashbuckling, yeah.
Yeah, the Marquis honored them with an enormous smile. "Good evening, friends," he said.
Right.
Which I really liked that. That was he's just like, we are now friends.
It is sort of like the perfect reminder of how cool, or not even cool, but the sort of general way that the Marquis carries himself, because we're at the end of the story, and this is effectively the last time that we see the Marquis before the end of the book. So it's just another sort of like whenever Frodo wakes up at the end of the movies and everybody enters the door in the epitome of their character style. Like Gimli walks in and is like, ho ho ho. The hobbits rushed in and they're all like little giddy children. Aragorn walks in and is all 60. Just like, yeah. Aragorn walks in and he's just like, cool. He's just like, yeah, I'm glad that you're alive. You know, that sort of stuff. It's just the definition of their characters being revisited because we're done with the story. So yeah, and they go into the other room to talk. There's some more answers about, you know, how everything transpired after they passed out in the room in Allington's halls. Yeah,
Richard starts to ask everybody. He's like, so what happens now? Like, Dor, you wanted to figure out what happened to your family, and now we did that. And then the Marquis, you got what you wanted. And he's like, I got what I wanted.
He fulfilled his deal and gets a new favor from Dor.
Yeah, exactly. So investments on favors. And then he's like, but now, what do I do? And Dor and the Marquis are like, well, you did a great job, man. Like, you're with us now. You're part of the team. You got some status. And he's like, that's not good enough.
Right. And the abbot's like, oh, and there's a where the Marquis is like, what do you think this is? The Wizard of Oz? You can't just go back or whatever. Yeah. Which is funny because then what the abbot then reveals is a Wizard of Ozian sort of thing where Richard clicks his heels and goes home.
Basically.
But the abbot's like, you are all very stupid people.
Yeah.
And you don't know anything. This is the key to all reality.
Yeah, Richard passed the ordeal of the key. He is its master until it returns to our keeping. The key has power. It's the key to heaven, said Richard. The old man's voice was deep and melodious. The key is the key to all reality. If Richard wants to return to London above, then the key will take him back to London above, as I like to call boring London.
Boring London, not cool London.
Yeah, not cool London.
So the key is the Ruby Slippers analog.
Back to boring old London.
The key will take you back if you so wish, which is the same reveal that happens in The Wizard of Oz, which is why I assume he uses that reference for the Marquis to say, the shoes will take you wherever you want to go if you want to. If you wish it enough, you will get it.
If you really believe.
Cut ahead for some indeterminate amount of time, I guess, for everybody to sort of heal up and them to put Richard's clothes back together.
Yeah, they fix his clothes and Richard heals up and then...
So at this point, he's just going through a full circle gauntlet of characters. We see Old Bailey, who gives him a feather. He gets on the Earl's train, gets knighted by the Earl.
It almost seems like he says, it gives a little flashback while he's waiting on the train to like, it almost seems like he's already said goodbye to Dor. At least from my perspective, it seemed like he had already said goodbye to Dor. Like, I guess he doesn't need her anymore. But it was like when Richard had asked Dor, she said that she didn't know, but why the Marquis didn't say goodbye. But maybe goodbyes were something else, like comforting people, at which the Marquis wasn't much good. Then she told him that she had something in her eye, and she gave him a paper with his instructions on it, and she ran away. So, I mean, Dor can go anywhere she wants to. She can just open a door there, but...
right, and Dor knows that she's going to see him in a bit.
Okay, but
because she knows her role.
See, I didn't... So, in my mind, I was like, I think that this is goodbye forever. What a lame goodbye in a fucking memory.
Right,
you know, not even, like, literally the goodbye. But,
I think it's a device to make the final meeting with them that much more meaningful.
Yeah, that's a good
It's a device
point.
to sort of trick us into thinking, well, I guess that was it. Jesus, what was that all about? And then she shows up and they can have a more personal, longer meeting that's a bit more meaningful to the reader.
As the first one in the gauntlet that he meets is Old Bailey, who gives him a super dope feather. A long black feather with a blue, purple, green sheen to it.
Yeah.
Red thread had been wound around the quill end of the feather.
It's a totally pointless meeting. It's just for us to see Old Bailey again.
Not pointless, dude.
He gets a feather that he loses later and doesn't care about.
No, he doesn't lose it.
He drops it and says whatever.
It's like his totem in what you call it, Inception. We can go over that.
Okay.
So
gets on the Earl's train, gets knighted by the Earl, gets dropped off at a station where he passes Lord Ratspeaker, who gives him all his stuff back.
Yeah, Richard is not fucking amused because Lord Ratspeaker's an asshole, and then also when they're talking, just to say, the anesthesia girl, no hard feelings. The rats are your friends still, and the Ratspeakers. You come to us, we'll do you all right. Thanks, said Richard. And then in his mind, anesthesia will take him, he thought. She's expendable. So he's like, he's kind of bitter. He's like, these fucking rat people don't care about each other. Why would they care about me?
Yeah. Or at the very least, Lord Ratspeaker doesn't care about his subjects.
Yeah, that's almost worse. But
and then he's continuing to just walk through, all this scenery and stuff like that.
Yeah, Richard got all his stuff back on.
Runs into Lamia and her coven. Gets a little bit scared, but Lamia's just being a tease.
Yeah, as she's been from the beginning.
Yeah.
I still like her,
Lamia's
even though she's evil. Yeah, she's great.
I love Lamia, but that's just because I love vampires and I want to be
she's
a
the only
vampire.
reason we got back to Islington, too, because nobody knew where to start. I mean, Hunter might have known because she was the patsy, or not the patsy. She was
She was
mole.
in.
Yeah,
it was probably just a matter of how, if we assume that Hunter knows where Islington is, but isn't supposed to know where Islington is without betraying her position. She's trying to figure out, how do I get us to get to the right spot? And then Lamia is a convenient way for us to get there without revealing the betrayal until the needed moment.
Yeah, she's definitely like a chess player with her moves. She thinks like 5 steps ahead, like a couple, I think last podcast she was thinking like 4 different ways on how she could get her and Dor out of this situation. One with minimal injury to her. One and a low success rate, and the maximum injury to her, complete success at getting Dor out. It was just funny listening, going in her mind and calculating it like that.
But then Richard finds himself on a hill outside of London 3,000 years ago. At this point, Dor approaches. They have an interaction. She's pleading with Richard to not go. She really likes him. Richard says, "I really like you."
You mind if I read a line from that?
Go for it.
Okay, she paused and then, all in a rush, blurted, "You've been quite a really good friend to me, Richard, and I've sort of got quite to like having you around. Please don't go." And then Richard kind of says the same thing. "I've sort of got to quite like having you around, too." So it's like, why do you guys say it like that? But anyway, it was just funny. They like each other. It sucks they have to say goodbye, but Richard says, "I don't belong here. Like, I gotta go home. And, then we won't ever see each other again," she said. "I suppose we won't." And then Richard walks, and Dor opens the door for him using the key, and then he steps through and cut to black. That's the end of chapter 19. The world went dark, and the low roar filled Richard's head like the maddened growling of 1,000 enraged beasts.
And then chapter 20 begins using literally the same first 2 sentences.
The world went dark.
And this whole chapter, we really don't... There's a couple of things that we're going to touch on, but there's really nothing to talk about. It's like 30 pages of Richard realizing that he doesn't like being back in his regular life.
Yes.
That's all it is. But there's a couple of things that happen that are worth talking about, and we'll definitely go through. But just to talk about this is, I feel like a slightly needlessly long.
Yeah, it's just all about Richard hating boring London, standing up for himself now. He's like a different person. There's a scene with Jessica where she comes back after he gets this promotion, and she's all like, "I'm sorry," and he calls her Jess, and he's like, "I kind of miss you calling me Jess," and then she gives him his ring back and says, maybe someday you could think about giving it to me again, and he gives the ring back to her right then, and he says, "Honestly, I don't think so." And she's like, "Did you find somebody else?" And he thinks about all the females that he had thought about kissing in the book, and he's like, he thought about I don't think he thought about Hunter, but I think he thought about Lamia, Anesthesia,
I think he did.
Hunter, Door, and he's like, "No, there really isn't anybody else. I'm a different person. I've changed," is what he actually says.
The chapter's necessary. I think it could have been done more quickly.
Definitely could have been done more quickly. They do a lot of jumping around, a lot of BSing about how Richard's like, "All right, well, I guess I'm just back to this boring life where my freaking work friends are going to set me up with this boring ass work chick."
We don't know exactly how much time passes during this chapter, but he does get a buildup of realizing that he doesn't like being back, that all he can think about is London Below.
Yeah, he doesn't care about any of his old things. He comes home and he doesn't watch TV.
It's all like boring and meaningless. Yeah. In the same way that like it's sort of like a be careful what you wish for sort of thing.
Exactly.
Because he gets not only his life back, but everything that he wants. Because, as the abbot said, the door will give you more or less what you, or the key will give you more, he doesn't say it in so many words, but the key's going to take you where you want to go. And where it takes him is now like an alternate reality of London above, almost in a way where it creates a situation where everybody thinks that he was just on vacation. Mm-hmm. Not that he just comes back after this undeterminate time of like, well, where the hell were you and what happened to you? He comes back and they all have had their memory modified, being like, oh, you just went on vacation.
Well, and he got like a promotion.
Yeah, he's got a promotion, just he already had it coming back. He didn't like go back and be like, oh, by the way, we were thinking about promoting you. No, he just has it already.
Yeah, he just already has this promotion. He's got this confidence, and then he gets this penthouse suite instead of, because they rented out his old flat.
So he's created this like ideal universe for himself using the key. And
everything
it's
he ever
more
wanted,
than he needed. Like, he gave himself a perfect life unconsciously, and now that he's in this perfect life, realizes that, God, this perfect life sucks.
Yeah, be careful
what do you do without having something to work for, is I think the underlying tone.
Or, I mean, he still has, like, a friend. I think Gary is still his friend, but it's
he still totally gets along with Gary, and Gary's cool or whatever.
Yeah, but
yeah, even Gary notices, like, you're being kind of weird, man, what's going on?
Yeah, are you okay?
And Richard's like, okay, let me just tell you everything, and then so they go out for a night with a bunch of coworkers. What's her name is trying to set Richard up with.
It's just the new girl in computer. Here, I can look it up. You keep talking.
But the lady that sets up the whole night out is that girl from before. She's the assistant to the head of the company or whatever.
And then the girl that they're setting Richard up with
is just some new girl in computing.
The girl from computer services.
Yeah. I don't think they ever even give her a name.
No,
right?
because she matters so little.
Yeah, that's how a little it ends up mattering. So they all go out for drinks, and like I think they also go for like a movie or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then during that time, Gary's like, "Dude, what's up with you?" And then
Richard alienates himself. Gary goes to find him, and then
Gary's like, "Well, fuck it, let's ditch this and we'll go talk about it." And then Richard ends up telling him the entire story. And Gary's like, "Dude, you need to go see somebody. Something's wrong with you."
I'm a little worried about you, buddy. And then he's like, "Hey, you want to get a taxi?" Richard didn't hear him, so he says it again. And then they get a taxi, and Richard's like, "Hey, you take this one, I'll get the next one." And so Gary's like, "Thanks, mate. I'll see you on Monday." And then he leaves.
Richard starts walking around.
Yeah, Richard just doesn't want to deal with anything.
He's just thinking about everything.
And he sees a nice old homeless lady.
Right, and he starts talking to her, just being like kind of crazy. He's having like a bit of a breakdown.
Yeah, Richard's being a little goofy.
And he ends up taking out the knife that Hunter had given him.
His knife now.
And his knife now. And scratches a door into a wall.
Freaking the old lady out.
The frame of a door. Yeah, he's like saying all this like crazy stuff, being crazy. He's pounding on the wall. He's screaming for door. The character door.
Yeah. Hey, is there anyone in there? Can you hear me? It's me, Richard. Door. Someone. He hurt his hand, but he kept banging and flailing at the brickwork. And then the madness left him, and he stopped. "Sorry," he said to the old lady, and she's pretending to be asleep, so she didn't say anything. And then Richard kind of hit rock bottom. He's kind of crumpled down on the ground. Like, what have I done to myself? Like, how could I have messed up this
I shouldn't have
bad?
left that. Like, this is all great, but it's so unfulfilling. Whatever he may be thinking. Mm-hmm. At this point, we just project our own thoughts onto him because he doesn't say anything. But what I imagine is that he's like, I'm not getting anything out of any of this.
Yeah, I wrote rock bottom. Even though he's killing it at life, he's like rock bottom emotionally. He's not satisfied anymore with boring London.
And then he looks back at the door drawing that he made, and it's no longer there. Instead, there's a hole, and there's a man standing there. The Marquis de Carabas raised an eyebrow. "Well," he said irritably, "are you coming?" And then Richard gets up and follows him, and that's the end of the book.
Yes. I really enjoyed it. I don't like to critique authors' endings very much. I think however they want to end, or not even necessarily just authors, but movies, shows, anything. I don't like to critique an ending because that was their vision, and so that's their ending. Whether I like it or not, it's not mine. And then once it becomes public, it's ours to enjoy, but it's not really mine to say like, hey, I could have come up with a better ending because then I should have written the book, But
right.
I honestly enjoyed it. There were a few little discrepancies, a few little things that didn't seem to be completely like canon. He seemed to have written, not canon, that's the wrong word, but completely in sync.
Just consistent with the storytelling. And I think that whenever you're writing something that is a bit of a mystery, that has some moving parts that need to come together at the end, you either write the end first, or at least know what the end is going to be, and then find the threads into that end, or like what J.K. Rowling did with Harry Potter, is that you just start writing, and then at the end find those threads and bring them together into an idea.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you read those books, a ton of times you can tell that she kind of left herself a few Easter eggs to pick up along the way so she could rewrite. Because in the 7th book, when you re-listen, I think they drop something about Beetle the Bard or whatever in book 2. And like when Harry goes to visit the Weasleys. It's all just like universe build,
at least in the way that I see it, having read the book several times, and then also in the way that she's described, because she's very vocal about what she, what her writing process was, what she does now, and she's gone back and said, but like the whole Dumbledore's gay thing was just an offhand comment that she made at like a speaking event where somebody asked, "Did Dumbledore ever have a wife?" And then she was just like, "Oh, Dumbledore's gay," which is just something that she knew about the character, but never put into the books because it didn't matter.
Yeah, no.
And so she's done all sorts of things like that since having written the books, where she just reveals all these like different little character tidbits of the things that she knew, but like as she's said before, she was just writing the books, and then she was able to pull those threads together at the end whenever she found what the end thing was going to be.
Dumbledore's the best.
Dumbledore's great. Dumbledore is my second favorite example of the string puller character.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The one who really knows everything that's happening and has the greater plan, and unfortunately at sometimes to some people's hurt feeling, manipulates them to enact his plan and stuff like that, which is something that his brother Aberforth complains about whenever they first meet him in the 7th book. He's like, that motherfucker was always just manipulating people for the thing that he thought was best.
Yeah, bastard. In this one, the Marquis seemed to be the string puller, but then later it reveals that Islington was a bit more of a string puller, just because nobody really knew the ultimate goal. But I think they were both kind of pulling strings.
There doesn't seem to be. I don't think that, or I mean, go ahead and finish what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I just wish there had been more. Like we were talking about a couple episodes ago, how we didn't want to know everything the Marquis was doing, and then literally the next chapter it tells you everything the Marquis is off doing.
Yeah.
I kind of wish there had been a little bit more creative license for our part, so we could think like, what was the Marquis up to? Like we know a few things that like I wish that it kind of gave us just a little bit more.
The thing with this book,
mystery,
which I think the thing that I appreciate most about this book is that it's very short. Everything happens like in a week, less than a week actually.
Yeah.
And then Richard being back and going through all of that might be a week or something like that too.
Mm-hmm.
So the time of everything is very short, and so it's all, and everything happens very quickly, and so it's just a very short, like I keep saying very short. It's just a vignette of something that happens in this world.
Yeah.
Which potentially Neil Gaiman could use as a means of writing more stories in London Below that don't necessarily have to do with these characters.
Yeah.
If he just does them each in like little installments, just vignettes of this world, rather than an overarching story like The Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter.
Kind of like how Terry Pratchett always goes back to Discworld, but not every book.
Yeah,
is
everything
congruent.
just exists in that universe, and some of it might connect here and there, even if it's only just like the same city or something like that. I haven't read any of them, but I know that he's got like 40 fucking books in that series.
I read like
there's
half.
no way they all connect.
Yeah, I read half of The Color of Magic, and that was a really weird book because it was about this wizard that didn't have. He only knew one spell, but it was like the most badass spell in the world. But he like if he did, he was like so scared to use it because he didn't know exactly what it was. So, but it was funny because he had this one fucking ultimate spell. He basically had like a level 5 spell and no other level 4, 3, 2, 1. Any other level. But yeah, enough about other books. So how did you feel about this one, Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere?
There are problems that I have with it. Mostly those consistency things when it came down to the end, which I think was just something that happens whenever you write yourself into a bit of a corner and you don't take the time to go back and figure it out.
I mean, in the prologue, when it talks about him writing the book, it says he wrote it really fast, like in 4 or 5 months. I know Stephen King always says if you can't finish a book, or at least the idea outline for the book in 2 months, what are you doing? He's very, but he's an 8 to 5 writer.
Yeah, if it describes him as having written it very fast, then I mean it makes sense. I'm not going to fault him for doing anything. Certainly since as we've already talked about, this is his first like novel, or at least the first one that gets published. Maybe he wrote other. I know that he wrote other things before, but this was his first fully published work.
Was it?
As a single like thing. He did like some writing for like comics and stuff like that before that. And he may have even had a series published, but this was his first like novel that was published. So,
well, sure, he was a writer when the BBC picked him up to write for Neil Neverwhere. Now maybe he was a script writer and then he jumped into books. I didn't know this was his first book. I think
this is his first published novel.
Oh, okay.
He may have written some of his other books first, or at least started on them. I know he did the comics things first, or the comics got published at least before he wrote this.
Comic books.
There was there was actually something that was happening, unrelated to all of this, more or less, in a podcast that I was listening to about something else, and then they referenced how Neil Gaiman had an interaction with somebody on Twitter, where they said that they were complaining about writing in comic books about something, blah blah blah. And then they were trying to talk. The Twitter user was trying to reference Neil Gaiman as an example for something, and then Neil Gaiman was like, "That's not how writing works. You don't know what you're talking about. I wrote a bunch of different stuff before my comics got published. They just didn't get published before the comics did."
Right.
So just from that tidbit, I know that he wrote a couple of his books, probably including Neverwhere, before the comics got published, but the comics got published first, and then the books got published. So I don't know. This is all like timeline stuff that may or may not matter, but there was just those inconsistencies I felt like could have been avoided by simply paying attention. And even if you're already at the end and don't want to go back and change some things, me being super specific about that sort of stuff, I would have gone back and fixed it.
I think I would have liked to also. I just have a feeling. I guess I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. It's something that he might not have noticed, or in his mind he thought.
And I absolutely don't know the situation that he was in at the time either. There could be a million things that played into it being an actual impossibility for him to go back and fix things. Or like you just said, a million different things that kept him from even noticing them. Yeah. So there's certainly no reason for fault. It's just something that me as the end user, the reader of the book, catches on, and it just bothers me. Yeah. The different little things there.
You think you're going to watch the show now and give it a shot?
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, we kind of probably
I don't watch a lot of shows to begin with anyways, but I would certainly be interested in having a visual representation of it. Yeah. With this, as far as the ending goes, it probably ends as perfectly as it can for this book, given how short everything else is in the book. It just seems it's just a little unfulfilling for me. Okay. I hope that there will come a sequel, and there's room for a sequel because one, Dora's got to find her sister. Right.
She wants to reunite London.
Two, there's all this stuff, where she talks about finishing her father's work or starting it, really. Yeah. And then Richard's got to go back and find a role now in London Below. Yeah. We assume he's going to just be hanging out with Dora all the time. Maybe they get married or whatever.
Yeah, he's her hero, so.
Yeah, so there's definitely room for another story to be told, of course, within this world, and then definitely with these characters.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it seems a little unlikely that he'll write another book, just because it's been, there's a little extra tidbit in the author's preferred text. It's got how the Marquis got his coat back. It's this little story. It's like 100-something pages. At least it felt like it. And it's interesting. And at the beginning, he writes a little prologue about how the BBC BBC Radio actually got Benedict Cumberbatch and a few other celebrities, I can't remember their name, to do a radio broadcast version of this book, and he loved it so much. He's like, man, I wish there was more. And he said he started this work back in 2002, his How the Marquis Got His Coat Back, and he's like, I have to finish it. And this was in 2013 when he got that the recording of the BBC Radio edition. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know if he came out with it that year or finished it that year, but I think it was pretty recently after that he finished it. And
it was Dirk Maggs, who I don't know, James McAvoy, Natalie Dormer, and Benedict Cumberbatch.
Who's James McAvoy? Why should I know? I feel like
James McAvoy played Professor X in the most recent. What are they called? X-Men. Professor X, the X-Men movies, First Class.
Oh, cool.
And then he was also in the fucking Wanted, the one where they're curving the bullets with Angelina Jolie.
I like that.
And then Natalie Dormer, she plays Lady Marjorie in Game of Thrones.
Oh, that's why they got her.
The most beautiful woman in all of Westeros. The most beautiful woman in all of the actual world, in my opinion. I'm in love with Natalie Dormer.
That's good. She is pretty. I think she's got a bit of like a pointy, squirrely face. Not that I mean.
I'm all about it. I'm all about those squirrels, man.
I'm all about the squirrely face, the cute cheeks. And...
those are big people.
Yeah, no, they got it.
And if that was in 2013, that was after all of these people we already know about.
Oh, after they're all all-stars.
Because,
it's an all-star radio. It's a radio broadcast, too. They got these beautiful people to be on a radio
Well, they're prominent British actors.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And, everybody loves the little Benedict Cumberbatch.
Right.
But, would you read another Neil Gaiman, you think?
Absolutely.
I would, too. I liked it.
I want to read American Gods because everybody that has read American Gods and that has referenced it in different things that I watch and listen to says that it's really fucking good.
And that's a Gaiman?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. One more time, what was that title?
American Gods.
American Gods. Writing it down.
Yeah, maybe later on we'll get to it. Maybe in an episode in the future. Or a series of episodes if we decide to read it like this one.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we need to figure out what our next book's going to be.
Cool, yeah. Nothing else you had to say about Neverwhere? You think it's all settled up? Or
that's all I had to say about it. I think maybe I'll come to appreciate it and like it more having it in hindsight.
Yeah. But
right now, there's a little bit of dissatisfaction with the end and definitely with some of those inconsistencies.
Yeah, is it the ending of the book?
The literal ending.
Okay, yeah. What were you not satisfied?
It's just a little unfulfilling. I don't feel like there was enough closure, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. In my mind, if they hadn't sent Richard to boring London and spent fucking 20 pages describing how much it sucks and then just putting him back in cool London, like I feel like he should have just stuck with him. And then I know that's dumb, but it didn't really do anything for me. Him going meeting Gary, turning down Jessica, it's like we knew he had all these skills now, and it's like
but it has to be explained.
I guess you're right.
It has to be said so that it can be like definitive, and even though we can all assume it.
It is cool though that it might show that. Honestly, I like to think that it shows that Richard has something a little more. Not necessarily that he's like an opener or anything, but he did cut a door out of nothing, and then he banged on it, and like that's not magic we know of, like that, especially from a London above-er.
I think it just further speaks to the connection between him and door that had the first door open.
I'd love to believe Richard's got a little bit of juice in him. Magic juice, by the way, that's what I meant. I'd love to think he's got a little bit of mana back pulled up, but
I mean now that he's a part of the world below, he's definitely going to grow into something of that nature, we can assume, because magic exists there. And like with most stories that deal with people of magic and people without magic, once you enter the world, you start to take on features of that world. Mm-hmm. So definitely that could be something that grows in his future. But for the sake of this story, I think that it's just another iteration of his connection with Dor.
Gotcha. I would like to recommend that everyone reads the final story, the little extra add-on.
How the Carabas got his coat back.
Yeah, how the Carabas gets his coat back. It's a fun little add-on, especially if you want a little more of this universe. It definitely give it a read.
An introduction of a couple of interesting characters, including one character that is close to Carabas.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. I enjoyed listening to it. I'm going to listen to that part again, I think, on the way home after this podcast. But it was just fun. I would recommend it to anybody. So if you get the chance, I don't know if it's in every edition, but I'd hate to say look it up online to see if you can get it for free because, support the author. But,
right.
Get it however you can and tell Neil what you think because he's a great author and I loved his first book. So I would love to check out another one. But anyway, let's check out another one of our books.
For the next one, we're going to go ahead and pick from one of the 3 that were part of the original 4, including Neverwhere that we picked from.
The 3 leftovers. The first one being Brian Sanderson's Warbreaker. That was the runner-up from last time. I don't know if y'all remember that.
That was in the final 2 of the 4, which is not like it was a great tournament. And then the other one being Beacon 23, which was the one about the effective lighthouse in space.
Yeah, that was really cool. I like that one, that idea a lot.
And then the other one was Saturn Run, which was about how there's a signal that or not a signal, but they identify an object going towards Saturn and slowing down, so they determine that it's not natural, it's artificial, and so then the world begins on a space race to go find out what it is and figure out what it is and obtain whatever alien technology it was.
Oh, dude, you have such a good memory. I'm so glad you remembered all that because I was like, I have no idea what Saturn Run was about. And then you saying all that, I was like, oh yeah, I remember reading that out loud. Do you remember what Warbreaker was about by any chance?
Warbreaker was about, there's just a high fantasy world. Mm-hmm. There's a magic called breath, which is an offering to the gods or whatever. That's what it's being used as commonly. There's like a deposed royal family of sorts. And then there's a character that has figured out a new way to utilize breath. And that's all that the sort of the hook page gives.
Okay. How do you want to do this? Do you just want to go with the runner-up? Or you said you had a bit of an idea on how you wanted to...
Yeah, that definitely seems like the way to go is to go with the runner-up, right?
Yeah, that's what I would think.
And it is enough of a pace change being more classical high fantasy, taking place in a fully fictional world, full-on magic and swords and sorcery sort of thing. But the sort of idea that I was going to present was that we change tack a little bit more by going sci-fi.
Okay.
Which Neverwhere is a bit of a cross between sci-fi and high fantasy because it takes place in the real world, but there is a fantasy version of London, which it being in a real world and having elements of fantasy sort of makes it sci-fi fantasy.
And there were a lot of elements of the real world in this, not fake, but in Cool London, they used all of Boring London's old broken down shit to make...
It gets described as modern fantasy in all the reviews of it.
Oh, okay.
But it's definitely just like a conjunction of several different kinds of fantasy.
I will tell you that Courtney, when she listened to our first podcast, she recommended Beacon 23. That's, by the way, guys, that's Mr. Kippy's youngest daughter.
Beacon 23 definitely is really interesting. And we don't know exactly what kind of genre it will be. Mm-hmm. We know that it's sci-fi because there's space stuff happening, stuff that's beyond our current technology in real life. But we don't know what's going to happen once everything gets off. Are there aliens? Are the aliens magical? Anything like that. We have no idea what's going to happen. Saturn Run appears to be more of a hard sci-fi thing with the existence of aliens just being a plot vehicle. Yeah. I think from what we can gather from the hook page of Saturn Run, the entirety of the story takes place around the race to get to it. Yeah. And then, depending on how far in when they get to the item is, it could either turn one way or another, and we'll see how it happens then.
Wasn't there kind of a vibe in that hook page that it was sort of had that Transformers feel, like they'd found some futuristic technology?
They determined that it's because what it does is it's not just an item that flies by Saturn, it slows down. And natural objects don't slow down.
Right, especially in space.
Spacecraft do. So it's like what it says, spacecraft does.
Yeah, a spacecraft
So they now everybody thinks it's an alien thing. We got to go figure it out so that we can get ahead of the other countries. Which it could potentially, if it's an alien thing, they find out that it's an alien thing, cool. Or maybe it does some interstellar stuff, and we find out that it's just technology from future humans.
Gotcha.
Because that's what Interstellar is about.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, they're future humans, they're not aliens.
Hey. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so that's all of our pitches again. How do you want to do this?
I really don't know. my initial inclination is to go towards Warbreaker because that's my vibe, and that's my that's my element is high fantasy. Beacon 23 came to us with a good recommendation.
Yes, and it's a shorter book, so we could get through it a little quicker.
Yeah,
not that really matters, but
and then just the whole sci-fi thing period between Beacon 23 and Saturn Run, I think might be a little refreshing to totally go in a different direction and just be sci-fi. But I mean, I really don't know. They all are interesting enough that I want to read them, and probably will at some point.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Honestly, just like I was thinking we were going to pick Warbreaker just because it was the runner-up. I kind of want to do Beacon 23. I don't know what's pulling me towards it, but it might be fun to change pace. I'm down for either. It's up to you, Mr. Will.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and do Beacon 23.
Okay, cool.
So the book is Beacon 23 by Hugh Howey. For the first section for this week's reading, we're going to get up to chapter 13. So chapters 1 through 12. It's in this edition of the book that I have in front of me, that's 92 pages worth of reading. I'm sorry, not even that. 91 pages worth of reading. Follow us on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Follow us on Twitter at ears_stamps. At our email, it's dogearsandtimestamps, all spelled out, at gmail.com. And then our Instagram is at ears_stamps.
Just like the Twitter handle.
And then if you want to find us on iTunes or any sort of podcasting app, that would be Dog Ears. One word, right?
Yeah, one word.
Dog Ears, space, ampersand, space, timestamps. One word. So 3 words. If ampersand is a word, 2 words and an ampersand. Yeah. Anyway, but that's how you find us. I'm sure you guys know, but tell your friends. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell people that you think would be interested. We need you guys.
Just tell people on the street.
Yeah,
just
tell
stop
anybody.
people and tell them this is a podcast that you should listen to.
Put a poster up in your local library and tell them about this awesome podcast.
Don't even ask the librarian for permission. Just fucking do it.
Yeah, ask for forgiveness, not for permission. That's rule number 1. So
never ask for permission.
Ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I think we got a great book lined up, and I'm really excited to get after it.
We'll see you next week. I'm Will Hedrick.
And I'm Jordan Schaffer. Don't forget your dog ears and timestamps.